Capable people don't become dependent overnight. They adapt to signals around them, and most of what they're adapting to was never designed. It just happened. So last week, we started in this series, this topic, this theme, if you will, the signals you're sending. And we talked about how you cannot read the label from inside the jar, how you have to step out in order to see what patterns, what signals are being given off. So this week, we are going one layer deeper. Naming the signal is step one. And this episode is about what's actually built underneath it. Because most leaders think the problem is approval, but it's not. It's architecture. But before we get into it, if last week's episode had you thinking about the signal you're sending, this one's going to show you exactly where that signal gets built into the system itself. And if you're ready to have that conversation for real and you want to find the gap, find the signal and remove it, the Aligned Leadership Audit is where it starts. Link is in the show notes. But let's get into today's episode. So here's what I want you to hear clearly before we go anywhere else. This isn't about approving less. This is about your team that your team is capable of catching things before they ever need your approval at all. So those are two completely different conversations. And almost no one is having the second one. Every organization has invisible decision rules. And these rules are invisible, so no one ever writes them down. They are decisions like which decisions need approval and which ones don't, which ones are safe to make alone, which ones get second guessed, and which ones are reversed after the fact. Your team isn't following the org chart. It's following the decision culture. They learned it the same way they learn everything else, by watching what happens in real time. But no one handed them a rule book. There's no SOPs for this one. They built it from observation. And organizations don't just have reporting structures. They have decision structures, and most of them are invisible. So what worked 20 people becomes the bottleneck at 200. And it's no one's fault. What worked when your team was just starting out becomes the gridlock when you're moving faster and working on more complex situations or goals. Because growth breaks old decision habits. Not because anyone failed or did anything wrong, but because nothing was redesigned to hold that new weight. So I was working with a client running a manufacturing operation that had grown really fast. And when they were smaller, one person the owner could run through the details before anything went out the door. Then they started growing, and no one planned it this way. The whole purpose of organizations is to grow, right? To scale, to become bigger, to get more work. So no one planned it. It just worked because the volume was small enough to catch things after the fact. They could always cover it. It was easy at this point. Well, then the volume doubled and then tripled. And that same system that used to catch problems quietly started missing them big time. Crews would head out of the building the wrong product, not because they weren't capable, but because no one was reviewing the details before they left, and people were running on old habits and assumptions. The company was eating the cost of redoing the work every time. So you can imagine how expensive this got. And the owner couldn't see how to fix it. The instinct was to push harder, move faster, to catch up on the volume, to hire more people. Well, we did the opposite. We had someone walk through every project with the crew before they left the plant. So 10 extra minutes every morning. And to tell you that the owner hesitated, it didn't make sense to him that slowing the crews down would fix a problem that was already about being, but it wasn't a speed problem. It was a missing the details problem. And once they started, that 10 minutes in the morning saved hours on the back end every single time. So that decision architecture, it was not the owner approving more. It was the system catching it before it even needed him to. He didn't become more involved. He became less necessary in the best way possible The crew still made the call, but the catch just moved where it truly belonged at the beginning instead of trying to compensate for a product that was built incorrectly. But here's the part that almost no one names. People aren't asking for permission. And so this is where that validation comes in. People are typically looking for safety. When someone asks, "What do you think?" there's a good chance that they're actually asking or saying from inside, like, "Will you support me if this goes sideways?" That's not a confidence problem. That's a safety problem. When ownership feels risky, approval or validation feels safe. So a lot of times when they're asking and bringing things back to you, they're looking for that safe response, not really external validation. So one more thing that I'd leave you with before we close this out is I'm not going to tell you to delegate more. Delegation is an individual skill, right? And it also depends on your team. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But decision architecture is an organizational capability. You don't need another seminar on letting go or passing it off to someone and not taking it back. You need a system that catches what used to only get caught by you. You want your team to take ownership. You've got to start thinking of that safety question first. And then you got to look at what system can you put into place that allows you to step on the outside of it and not be a part of it. So let's picture this, right? 10 extra minutes every morning, which seems like a lot, especially when you're putting new systems in place, especially when you feel behind or you're in crisis mode or you're just a fast-moving organization. But 10 minutes every morning, somewhere in your business, somewhere on your teams, not you reviewing everything, a system built once, but catching what used to cost you hours later. This is what protects your time without removing your oversight. The decision still gets made at the level it should be made. The catch happens early, where it's cheap, instead of later when it gets very expensive. And you're not in it anymore. You built it well enough that you don't have to be in every one of those decisions. At first, that owner was in a part of that 10 minutes in the morning with the crew leads, with the manufacturing operators, like sitting with them. But then after they got the system, they knew how it worked. He was able to remove himself and he saw it working smoother. This is something that you already know. You already know how to build this. You've built it before, even if you've never named it that way. Because I know that you're a leader, you're a systems builder. Every system you've ever put into place that worked because it caught something before it became a cost. Why else would we have systems but to help us become more efficient, lower our energy, lower the cost of things, right? So this is the same instinct, but applied to decisions instead of inventory. And so here is your system check, your signal check that I have for you today. What signal have I consistently sent that makes bringing it back to me the safest option? I'll read that again. What signal have I consistently sent that makes bringing it back to me the safest option? Again, a lot of times this is not about validation or approval. It may look like that we may hear those words, but the intent behind it is, am I safe? If this goes sideways, are you going to support me? Is this going to get us to the next level, or is this going to get us to our goal? And we know not always the safest option is not always the best option, right? So ask yourself that signal check. And before we close, capable teams don't hand decisions back because they can't decide. Again, we talked about this at the beginning, that we're not talking about teams that are not capable. You know the difference between a capable team or a capable individual and someone who is highly capable and just not working at the level that you know they can work at. So they hand them back. They hand these decisions back because no one's redesigned the system to catch things without them. So this is not a delegation conversation. This is an architecture conversation. And a lot of time it comes with growth. It comes with scaling. It comes because your team is getting better at what it does. And so things are shifting. They're moving faster. You're working at a high level. So if you're ready to have this conversation, this architecture conversation, the Aligned Leadership Audit is where it starts. 45 minutes, just you and I. We can just talk about what's going on, look at it, and see what needs to change. And then we'll talk about how to change it. TammyMurrayCoaching.com/call, but the link is also in the show notes. And until then, I will see you next week. Bye for now.